Is it also to be found in Mary Wollstonecraft's Maria? Well, yes, indeed, as several of you argued, but as several of you also argued, there are limits. Anna, Wollstonecraft believes that nature is a source of comfort and joy. When Maria goes to visit her father in chapter 9, she says, "The first scent of the wild flowers from the heath thrilled through my veins, awakening every sense to pleasure." That seems pretty unqualified, doesn't it? That appreciation for the natural world. Danielle follows up, "See the use of positive language around the natural world. Freshness that thrilled the heart is a powerful way to talk about nature being an uplifting, soul-fulfilling entity, and one cannot but concur." However, once again, there's some complexity here, isn't there? Bray writes, "Catching a distant tree through the grates or having a recollection of a verdant meadow only gives her a transient comfort, not a lasting comfort, but a transient one, a temporary one. Nature cannot rescue you from your prison except transiently, temporarily." And Bridget concurs. At one point, Maria, quote, "opens her window and admires nature with the thin, watery clouds of twilight, making the long, silent shadows visible. The air swept across her face with a voluptuous freshness that thrilled to her heart, awakening indefinable emotions." But the feeling is fleeting, Bridget argues, as she is once again reminded of her current state. I mean, see the limited potential or potency it has for Wollstonecraft as opposed to Blake. Noah, quote, "Maria was happy till an autumnal scent wafted by the breeze of morn from the fallen leaves of the adjacent wood made her recollect that the season had changed since her confinement. Prior to this moment, Maria was faced with the voluptuous freshness that thrilled her heart. At first, Maria is joyous upon feeling the air in her face, but she soon feels sorrow because she sees that the season has changed as she has been locked away and incarcerated. The sense of joy nature provides, then, proves a passing one. Indeed, nature can itself bring sadness. She'd be less sad, the claim seems to be, if she were not still at the window. Nature can itself bring a sense of its own and your passing, right? You see this double prong here. Transient joys and the sadness of transience itself. So there's a wrinkle here of complexity as we begin to examine Maria's interactions with the natural world. And in fact, often even the transient joy is not simply purely joyous, but there's something in it that's not a part of it, right? And that somewhat spoils it, or at least inflects it. Even when you're, quote, in nature, the joy can be limited, inflected as that immediate joy is, by a sense of missing something. Nature's joys are not what they once were, you discover. Even as you're trying to enjoy nature in its present moment, you can't help but feel that it's not what it once was. And you can see how that speaks, doesn't it, to a certain limited potency of nature with respect to some of these romantic idealizations we'll be seeing in the natural world, especially, as I said before, far beyond anything we find in Blake, let alone in Mary Wollstonecraft, what we're going to see next week and in the weeks following when we talk about Coleridge and Wordsworth, who are resident, almost unqualified romantic nationalists. Anna, again, put a capstone on this play. It's a mixed metaphor, isn't it? Quote, "To be in nature is to be happy and carefree, but also to suffer a reminder of what once was. Nature may awaken nostalgia, which can be saddening." Sensualism. It's to be found in Blake, especially the early Blake, of marriage, the marriage of heaven and hell, and of visions of the daughters of Albion, as well as in the poet John Keats, as we will see down the road. Indeed, it is to be found in all the major romantics, with the possible exception of Shelley, again, as we shall see. This is that theme of free love we spoke of briefly last week in discussing Introduction and Earth's Answer, both from the Songs of Experience. In marriage and visions, it blossoms. Sensualism, romantic sensualism, the term includes, but it's not limited to sensuality. It includes sensuality, physical pleasure in the senses, largely the sense of touch, especially in Blake. Maybe not in Wordsworth, we're going to see that. Blake complains about Wordsworth and how prudish he is. It includes sexuality even in Blake, and I think John Keats as well, as we will see down the road. By way of Bethune, Blake even features sexual love, as we will see in this micro-lecture. But make no mistake, sensualism also includes a broader category of sensuousness, okay? An embrace of all five senses and more. not just the sexual senses, as it were, the senses that are at work or at play in actual sexual encounter. Note the business about the doors of perception, which Blake imagines being cleansed, opened, upon which, quote, the whole creation appears infinite and holy. This is the plate over on the right. Second paragraph, for the cherub with his flaming sword, never mind who he is for the moment, is hereby commanded to leave his guard, a tree of life. And when he does, the whole creation will be consumed and appear infinite and holy, whereas it now appears finite and corrupt. And you'll notice how this will happen, how this will come to pass, by an improvement of sensual enjoyment. Right? This will come to pass by an improvement in sensual enjoyment. Sensual enjoyment, I would argue strongly, includes visual enjoyment, auditory, olfactory, for Pete's sake. It's not just sexual. And you'll note that the whole world gets redeemed, not that just that present moment of sexual consummation, okay? And not just the bodies involved in that present moment, but the whole world, your whole way of looking at the world is redeemed by way of an indulgence of sensual enjoyment. This is Blake's claim. This early moment in Blake's career, he's making very high claims for the body. I think you would agree. Energy, which he sees as from the body, it's the only life and it's from the body, it's eternal delight. Energy is the only life. It is from the body. You see how indispensable the body is. If you want to live, you have to get in touch with your body. Note the peripheral role reason is accorded in the good life, the only life worth living. It is the bound, the outward circumference. Okay, I want to call your attention over here to the left. Energy is the only life. This is way down below. The following contraries to these are true. Number 2, energy is the only life and is from the body. Reason is the bound or outward circumference of energy. Right? Note the peripheral role reason is accorded in the good life. It is merely the bound, the outward circumference. Think of the phrase within reason. Want a party? Energy asks. Within limits, within reason. Reason replies. So you see the indispensable role of reason. It's Tuesday night, let's say. Energy says, let's go out and get wild. Reason replies, got some studying to do here, buddy. The voice of reason, very much what Blake is talking about. Now, it can stiffen into the spirit of restraint that disallows all pleasure, especially reinforced by morality, fear, the father, that father of jealousy we were talking about before, who doesn't want you to have any fun whatsoever. But let's not go there right now. We're talking about the body and Blake's affirmative representation of human desire at its most carnal. Okay, in reading Visions, note the situation, the situation, which after the opening catastrophe does not change much. Theotorment, the name means God tormented, has become upset, to put it mildly, by what he sees as sexual misconduct on the part of Bromian, the brute on the left in the illumination down below, and Athun, to whom he has chained Bromian. He brings the wrath of God down upon them and himself succumbs to despair. Then storms rent Theotormant's limbs. He rolled his waves around and folded his black jealous waters round the adulterate pair, bound back to back in Bromian's caves. Terror and meekness dwell. At entrance, Theotormant sits, wearing the threshold hard with secret tears. Beneath him sound like waves on a desert shore, the voice of slaves beneath the sun, and children bought with money, that shiver in religious caves beneath the burning fires of lust, that belch incessant from the summits of the earth. That's quite a bit of poetry there. We're going to make sense of some of it, not all of it. Theo first feels his own jealous wrath as an external thing, you will notice. Storms rend him before they rend anybody else. Instead of commanding himself, beating back the storms, he stokes them. He inhabits them. He becomes them. In fact, he already is them. They are his. And is not his own externalized eye, that eye that we see staring from the sky. Thereby does he put the two offenders in a sort of hell. So you see how indiscriminate he is during this freakout. Terror and meekness dwell together on the same plane and in the same condition. That's not justice. Sexual jealousy, it's not just. It's immoderate. It cannot be moderated. He's so angry he cannot see straight. He's caught up in these waves of passion, these storms of passion, is he not? Because the truth is that Bromian did not seduce a willing, you read earlier in the poem, just above the passages quoted above, you find that Bromian did not seduce a willing Athun. Rather, quote, Bromian rent her with his thunders on his stormy bed, lay the faint maid, and soon her woes appalled his thunders hoarse. So this is something like rape that occurs, right? And he just can't see it. He's just so freaked out by what has happened. His jealousy is so strong that it seems like a storm that's overtaken him. We sometimes feel that way about our passion, do we not? That it's almost like independent of us. And that's a big mistake in Blake. And now that the stormy freakout has passed, and now we're in the situation we see in the illumination on the left, okay, he's in a funk. Freakout is succeeded by funk, a funk in which he's neither looking nor listening, but self-communing, okay, which is the worst thing you can do at Blake. Turn away from the world and like just close yourself off from everything and sit down. Remember the opening of the human abstract. A little bit like the same situation here, right? Perhaps he has sat down with holy fears, as does the figure in the human abstract, and has begun to water the ground with tears. Because here we read, he sits wearing the threshold hard with secret tears. And this is like the worst thing that you can do in Blake, right? Little wonder that he's under a tree. Do you remember the tree of mystery, right? This tree that grows in your own human brain, right? Not in nature. The gods sought for it. But they found it grows in the human brain, does this mystery. And he obsesses over the mystery of what has happened. In other words, it's self-imposed. If you would really just open up your eyes, you could say that all that energy of the storm has manifested itself in this blocking presence of a sort of tree, a kind of appalling pall of mystery that looms over you, that seems to have a living force and seems to have this rootedness and seems to block out the world. And so therefore it's best imaged as a kind of tree you're sitting under, right? And he obsesses over this mystery as he goes about his self-communion, the mystery of what has happened and of a world in which such things can happen, right? And you can almost see him verging on this God-tormented fellow, God-fearing fellow who is now being tormented by God, wondering about the justice or want thereof that's been done him. He can almost sound a little bit like the fellow or the persona of Blake, who speaks that poem, The Tiger, we talked about in our last micro video. The one thing that he doesn't do that could save him, and Athun, and I suppose you could say at least mete out justice to Bromian, right? And in a way, I guess you could argue, save Bromian as well, is open his ears and open his eyes. Rather, he blocks out Athun, who tries to explain and console. She, quote, hovers by his side, as we read further along in the poem, persuading him in vain. Theo Torment hears her not. To him, the night and morn are both alike. A night of sighs, a morning of fresh tears. So he's really given way to his grief at this point, now that his wrath has passed. And none but Bromian can hear her lamentations, which is pretty amazing when you think about it, that even Bromian is paying more attention to her. What Athun says. She gives voice to the, let's call it, free love imperative, echoing both the bard of marriage and the earth figure who speaks Earth's answer. First, she tries to appease him, Theo Torment, accepting, even calling down upon herself what he would see as a punishment to fit the crime. She goes with his program. I call with holy voice, kings of the sounding air, rend away this defiled bosom that I may reflect the image of Theo Torment on my pure, transparent breast. Theo Torment's eagles, at her call, descend and rend their bleeding prey. Theo Torment severely smiles. Her soul reflects the smile as the clear spring muddled with feet of beasts grows pure and smiles. Well, think of those kings, eagles, as the crowning elements of Theo's fierce storm of moral condemnation, the acquaintance with which we've already made. They are a little like thunderbolts of Jove, though they have a Promethean quality that is very romantic, as we'll see, Prometheus being a major figure amongst the romantics. Being embodiments of anger, as are Jove's thunderbolts, embodiments of anger that concentrate and give a certain purchase, a certain bite to the energy of the storm, literally in this case. This is energy gone bad, right? Which it often does in Blake. When thwarted, it tends to go bad, as we've seen. Athun hopes to remove the defilement of what has happened by submitting to, even seeking out, painful, purgative punishment. The better, in so doing, to be as he, Theo Tormund, would have her be, to reflect the image of Theo Tormund, to be the Athun Theo Tormund would consider ideal. Again, she's going with his program. And you see just how narcissistic he is, right? And she's playing along at this point. I think a moment of immediate desperation before clarity arrives, which it soon does. Because in any case, it doesn't work. He only smiles. And that severe smile I hope you find as disturbing as do I. The act does serve to clarify for her his muddled attitude, the clear spring muddled with feet of beasts. His muddled attitude, right? She gets a little bit of a grip on what that attitude might be, having tried to see things as he sees and smile as he smiles. Now, having tried to be what he wants to be, what he wants her to be, a reflection of his quite fragile purity, right? All that defilement removed. And having failed, she will try to get to the true heart and soul of the matter, which could be formulated thus. Such purity as he demands of her sustained, you can sustain such purity only at the cost of life itself. The only life, if you recall that phrase from marriage, which requires that we love freely. Now, there's some very complex and very wonderful poetry that I wish we had time to work through it line by line. We clearly don't. There's just lots of lines in there, right? And the sort of dialectical back and forth between the various characters. Bromian, Theo Tormund even speaks finally, though he doesn't really look at anybody when he's talking, and you feel he's really talking to himself, right? And then, of course, Athun herself. And when Athun speaks, here's some of the stuff she says that I think is a straightforward, finally, enunciation of this business of free love. I cry, love, 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 happy, happy love, free as the mountain wind. Over every human porch these words were written. Take thy bliss, O man, and sweet shall be thy taste, and sweet thy infant joys renew. Infancy, fearless, lustful, happy, nestling for delight in laps of pleasure. Innocence, honest, open seeking, the vigorous joys of morning light. Open to virgin bliss. Who taught thee modesty, subtle modesty? Well, I think one of the implications of what we have just read here in these lines is she's saying something about love and free love. Free love is, and this is the only kind of love worth living, worth having, worth embracing, because it's the only kind of love that will keep you alive, make you live. Free love is innocent love, sweet, blissful, vigorous, unashamed, fearless, and that's a really important word. I think we've seen that in Blake. The worst thing to fear is fear itself. We said that earlier on, right? This is a fearless love that she's embracing in this moment. It's free from unnatural modesty, a thing not of the dark night, but of this. It is a thing. This free love is not of the dark night, which is a different kind of love, which isn't really love, but of the sunny morning, open as the day. For any other sort of love is not really love. And she goes on to say this a little bit later in the poem. Can that be love that drinks another as a sponge drinks water? We're going to be making sense of this complex poetry here in just a moment. Can that be love that drinks another as a sponge drinks water? That clouds with jealousy his nights, with weepings all the day, to spin a web of age around him, gray and hoary, dark, till his eyes sicken at the fruit that hangs before his sight. Such is self-love that envies all, a creeping skeleton with lamp-like eyes watching around the frozen marriage bed. Well, this is some pretty impressive lines here. Let's try to make some sense of them. Love that, this is the wrong kind of love. Love that drinks up, absorbs the beloved. That's not love. Possessive love is not love. Love in which the beloved is owned by the lover, is controlled by the lover, controlling love. That's not true love. It is rather self-love, Athun claims. It's acquisitive love, envying all, it wants all, it just wants everything in its grasp, right? And I think that desire to acquire everything to do with the beloved, which is something that I think you've probably seen in some unhealthy love attachments, perhaps, that you've seen in around people in your lives, right? Where you feel this, it's not a really healthy kind of relationship because one of the members in the one of the parties to the relationship is possessive and is acquisitive. is it not typically, and this is Thune's point, I think it's Blake's point as well, rooted in a fear of loss? Okay. Uh, the premise of which, of course, is that you own the territory of the beloved. I would say ultimately, now this isn't something that arises in this moment as clearly as it could, a fear of death, that ultimate mode of self-loss, seems to underlie this horror of losing something, this terror, this fear that you're going to lose something. You see the sort of horrible jealousy, even paranoia, to which such a feeling can give rise. You know, in Theo's case, the storm of jealousy lingers in the form of those clouds, right? The clouds with jealousy as nights. The nights are dark, hard to see what's going on. Someone might be trying to get to him. Somebody might be trying to get to her. You know, as she lay in the bed next to you, somebody might be trying to get to her. It's dark. I can't tell what's going on the other side of the bed. You see these paranoid thoughts. This is all about that sort of feeling we have that we will lose something if our beloved is not entirely focused on us and our needs moment by moment, day after day, year after year. And we saw this unappeasable, groundless, destructive, dark, secret love in the sick rose. I'm not going to go back and say at this point exactly where, but it is a point we made about that poem earlier. Here, all day long, when the sun finally comes up, right? You've escaped that horrible night of paranoid imaginings. All day long, you sorrow over what happened. What must she have been dreaming, even if there wasn't something, some kind of worm out there in the night seeking her out, right? What was she dreaming about last night, right? That's something you couldn't tell, even if you had the lights on. Was it somebody else? And you see the root of it all. It's this self-love, this fear that is itself rooted in fear, right? All that concern seems to be, if you see what I'm saying, seems to be a product of this concern for yourself, not for the beloved, really. That you're going to lose something that the beloved represents to you. And Thune's point is that such self-love, which is what we have in the case of Theo Torman, it's blight. It's a blight, and it blights, using that as a verb. We have that wonderful image of the spider, not named as such, but we get what it does. It's such self-love blights as if it were a spider spinning a web of age that spoils the beloved's fruit. Think of that as the sexy body of the other, hanging before one in prospect, and of course, it's as though you just can't appreciate this this moment when you are given over to this mode of paranoid self-love that is so fearful and so full of dark imaginings. Everything is blighted, as though everything has been prematurely aged, and desire itself seems blighted, if you see what I'm saying, and blighted and blunted. The final image is especially Gothic, I think. There's some Gothic imagery in this passage that I think is really underappreciated. The final image is especially so, given over to such a fruit, flesh denying attitude, as is the attitude of the self-loving, fundamentally self-loving lover. He cannot love the beloved for the beloved's own self, but only as an extension of himself. Given over to such an attitude, we deny our own flesh, right? We too are blighted and become just like those fleshless skeletons imagined here that are, really attentive, right? Because remember, this paranoia is such an infliction, isn't it? An affliction. What do we do at night, the next night maybe, after the night of wakeful worries? We watch our beloved instead of doing something else, and thereby freezing, as it's put so well here, I think, the marriage bed. Okay, so it's a real horror story that we're talking about here, the horror story of self-love pretending to be love. Little wonder Thune's reaction, which is to avow selfless love, free love to the max, I think you'd agree. And this is one of the most notorious passages in all the early Blake. I'll just read it and let you make of it what you will. This is Thune, what she says she's going to do in opposition to this nonsense that she's getting from Theo Torman. But silken nets and traps of adamant will Thune spread and catch for thee, Theo Torman, girls of mild silver or of furious gold. I'll lie beside thee on a bank and view their wanton play in lovely copulation, bliss on bliss with Theo Torman. Red as the rosy morning,
lustful as the firstborn beam. Athun shall view his dear delight, nor even ever with jealous cloud come in the heavens of generous love, nor selfish blightings bring. I think you would agree that's what she's imagining at that moment is about as selfless a mode of love as one can as one can well imagine, and almost seems to be a kind of radical, the radical sort of overreaction in response to what you're getting from what you get from Theo Torment. And again, it's an amazingly rich poem, and we could go on reading it for hours, this book, but we need to be selective. And in fact, this micro lecture has to come to an end at some point, I'm sure you're thinking. So let's just close it down with a little bit of attention to this, I think one of the most wonderful moments and a very telling moment in the poem. Again, it's Athun. The moment of desire, the moment of desire. The virgin that pines for man shall awaken her womb to enormous joys in the secret shadows of her chamber. The youth, shut up from the lustful joys, shall forget to generate and create an amorous image in the shadows of his curtains and in the folds of his silent pillow. Do you know what she's talking about? Are not these the places of religion, the rewards of continence? Which means like self-containment, sexual self-suppression. The self-enjoyings of self-denial, which is a wonderful phrase, right up there with such as self-love that envies all. The self-enjoyings of self-denial. Why dost thou seek religion? Is it because acts are not lovely that thou seekest solitude, which is the worst thing that you can seek, as far as Blake is concerned, where the horrible darkness is impressed with reflections of desire? Father of jealousy, be thou accursed from the earth. Why hast thou taught my Theotormon this accursed thing? Till beauty fades from off my shoulders, darkened and cast out a solitary shadow, wailing on the margin of non-entity. Well, again, some amazing lines, and let's try to make some sense of them, and then we'll call it a day. Such is self-love that envies and fears all. You remember, she said elsewhere. Here, the virgin and the youth, we met them nominally by those same names in Awe Sunflower, one of the songs of experience. Ultimately, both, we are told in that poem, pine away with desire, okay, and become skeletons when they have denied desire. They die because without giving free rein to desires, we have seen, it's to live no sort of life that's worth living. But even before that horror happens, okay, something else sort of horrible occurs. So we have a sort of double whammy before you're done pining. Some twisted stuff occurs, okay? Well, desire has not yet completely abated and wasted and gone away, right, due to unfulfillment. Desire does something else, right? Okay, desire unfulfilled wastes, poisons, kills almost, but worse, all that desire, before it dies out, becomes thwarted, twists, transmogrifies. Okay, it's kind of dammed up and it leaks out in all kinds of strange, ultimately horrible ways, kind of gothic ways, right? Creating shadows of the world that become substitutes for healthy engagement with real people. And that's all that business about the amorous images in the folds of his silent pillow, okay, which is an image of masturbation. Everybody agrees, all the critics agree that that is what we have here is, this is, he's going to end up blaming this all on religion. Let me continue. You get locked in, a habit of self-communing develops, right? As we've already seen. Such are the, quote, rewards of continence, of self-suppression, and such are the situation, such the attitudes that religion teaches, Athun asserts. Religion puts us into such a sick place, in the new agey sense of place. I'm in a bad place. It puts us into a bad place, according to Athun, and I think Blake, she is his spokesperson in this moment. It is a place of horrible darkness, haunted by reflections of what we want. Now, this is what happens before the reflections go away, because we end up just pining away and desire ends up dissipating. But before it does, there's all this alternative horror, okay, of kind of sick, self-enclosure, where you have substituted your own, he would call them masturbatory images of the world for the world itself. And this is just not a real healthy position to be in, according to Blake/Athun. So yes, Athun deepens her indictment of self-love. She's headed in this direction. Her indictment of self-love is deepened, as she continues, to include the cause, not just the effect. And again, religion This is an indictment of religion, which teaches that, I mean, to put it very simply, acts are not lovely, right? Sexual acts are not lovely. They must be hidden away from the light. They must be submitted to rules and regulations. They must be limited. They must be contained and so forth. Religion, and this is a really important point, yes, but religion founded upon your reason. If you look at that image over there on the left, founded, that's a different book. It's not a book that we're reading in this class, but it's a book he wrote after writing Visions of the Daughters of Albion, shortly thereafter, where he felt he wanted to talk about this father of jealousy a little further. And the father of jealousy is actually a pretty rational guy, or at least he's a product of our reason. He's founded by, religion is founded by your reason. That's the name of the guy, but that's a pun on your reason, right? So the father of jealousy is, as it turns out, the product of inference, rational inference on our part, right? And it's himself seen as a rather rational figure. So you can see how really what Blake is objecting to as much as anything else, and maybe more so, is this right elevation of the rational mind, making sense of stuff that's hard to make sense of, coming to these decisions, coming to these conclusions, and enthroning itself as the source of these conclusions and of these inferences, enthroning itself above all our faculties, all the other faculties that we have of the body, the senses, and especially the imagination, right? So you see, the theotorments of the world, in their fear, call upon their rational minds to make sense of the world. And they find some, relief from all the horror thereby, right? And so you can see how they would end up saying, hey, I need to be more rational all the time because it makes me feel better when I'm sitting here caught up in this whirlwind, right? So we saw the speaker of the human abstract, you might recall, doing that, sitting down with holy fears and creating, right, a religion out of it, a mysterious religion, a tree of mystery is, and a God to go with that tree of mystery, right, who plants that tree, and, a little bit as God created the Garden of Eden. So we see the speaker of the human abstract doing that. Here we see Theo doing it as he wonders. Remember, he has some lines, Theo has some lines that are very mysterious. He's sitting and weeping and self-communing, trying to get to the bottom of it all, asking all these questions and trying to arrive at answers to these questions. And where does he end up? Well, he decides that there must be a maker out there who's testing us, instructing us, and who wants us to turn away from each other and worship not ourselves and others, other humans, right? But him. Blake's answer, all deities reside in the human breast. Well, we're going to have to call it a day. So keep reading.